I want to talk about a gap. Not a knowledge gap, not a skill gap, something subtler than that. It's a gap between a man who understands courage, who can describe it, quote it, and explain it, and a man who actually has it. You probably know someone who can quote Marcus Aurelius from memory. Maybe that's you, and there's real value in that. I mean that genuinely. But there's something I've been thinking about for a while: the Stoics. And I say this with real respect for what they built, they thought about virtue, they reasoned their way to it, they wrote about it with more clarity than almost everyone who came before or after. And then there were people who didn't just think about it, they wore it. And the difference between those two things is what this video is about. Let me start where I always start when this comes up. The Stoics were serious. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome. He had more power than almost any person who has ever lived, and he sat down every morning and wrote things like, confine yourself to the present. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's not a man performing wisdom. That's a man genuinely wrestling with how to use power without being destroyed by it, and that matters. Epictetus was a slave, not metaphorically, actually enslaved, and he developed a philosophy of freedom so complete that people have been reading it for 2000 years. He understood something about the interior life that most free men never figured out. And in Seneca, whatever his personal contradictions, and he had them, Seneca understood time in a way that cuts straight through. He wrote, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." So I'm not here to dismiss this man. What he built is genuinely valuable. If Stoicism is where you started, it's a good place to start. But I think it has a ceiling, and I want to try to show you where that ceiling is. Now, before I go further, let me be upfront about something. The people I'm going to talk about in this video, I'm going to call them Christians, because that's what they were. But I want to be clear about what I mean by that and what I don't mean. I'm not asking to convert to anything, I'm not making a theological argument, and honestly, the word I probably want to use for some of these people is saints, but don't get hung up on that title, and don't let it close you off. Some of them were Catholic, some weren't, and what they all share is something simpler than a denomination. They actually did what the philosophers were only describing. That's the only lens I'm asking you to use here. Not, this is your religion, but did this person actually live what they believed? Because if the answer is yes, and in these cases it clearly is, then what they did is worth looking at, regardless of where you stand on the rest of it. And here's the thing about Stoic virtue. It's essentially individual, it's interior. It's about you mastering yourself, controlling your reactions, being indifferent to what you can control, and that's generally powerful. But notice what it doesn't do. It doesn't really tell you what to do with your virtue once you have it. It doesn't give you a direction to point it. It doesn't tell you who to give yourself to, or what's worth dying for. Seneca wrote beautifully about self-mastery. When Nero, the emperor who, after leaving his boss, finally ordered him to die, Seneca opened his veins in a bathtub, alone, with his philosophy as his only companion. That's not a criticism of him, that's a genuinely dignified death, but it's also a death that went nowhere. It didn't build anything, it didn't change anything. It was a man being consistent with his philosophy to the very end. Now, compare that to Paul. Paul was also executed, also died for what he believed, but the difference is, what he believed was pointed outward. His death was part of something larger than himself. It was a death that sent ripples through the next 2000 years of civilization. The Stoic sailing, as I see it, is this. It's a philosophy of excellent endurance. But endurance for what? That question is where the Stoics run out of the road, and it's where something else begins. Let me give you three people. Joan of Arc. She was 17, a peasant for a villain in France, couldn't read or write, and she walked into the court of the Dauphin of France and told him she'd been sent to help him to take back his kingdom. And then she did it. She led armies, she was wounded in battle and went back in. She was captured, tried for heresy, and burned at the stake. And she never recanted what she believed. Chesterton wrote about her in a way I haven't been able to shake. He compared her to Nietzsche, who wrote about the greatness of warriors and A Triumph of Will, and to Tolstoy, who wrote about compassion and the dignity of the poor. And then he said, Joan of Arc didn't write about those things. She was both of them. Nietzsche admired the warrior, John fought. Tolstoy admired the peasant, John was one. He called them theorists who never did anything, and her, someone who simply did it. And remember Paul. I mentioned Paul already, but I want to stay here for a moment. Writing the letter to the Philippians from prison. He doesn't know if he's going to be executed, and what does he write? I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. Now, the Stoics say something very similar, amor fati, love your fate, being different to the circumstances. But Paul isn't describing difference, he describes something that came from outside and transformed him from the inside. He says he learned it, past tense, through action, experience of both, not through reason alone. That distinction between a philosophy you reason your way to and a transformation you go through, that's the gap I'm trying to point at. And remember St. Francis. This one might be the most counterintuitive example of the three. Francis came from money. His father was a wealthy merchant. He had everything: comfort, social status, a future that has basically laid out for him. And he walked away from all of it. Not as an intellectual exercise, not as a stoic practice of voluntary simplicity. He actually gave his clothes back to his father in a public square, walked out barefoot, and spent the rest of his life with the poorest people he could find. And then built something. He started what became one of the largest religious movements in human history, built hospitals and schools across Europe, and transformed the way an entire civilization thought about poverty and dignity, all without owing anything. The Stoics had a concept of detachment from material things. It's a beautiful idea. Francis didn't have a concept. He had a life. So, what to do with this? I'm not going to tell you what to become a medieval mystic or give your clothes away in a public square. Please don't do that. That's not the point. The point is a question of direction. Stoicism, at its best, trains you to master yourself. That's worth doing. Start there if you haven't already. But mastery of self is preparation, it's not the destination. The question is, what do you do with a man who has mastered himself? What does he give himself to? What's he willing to be wrong for? What's he willing to lose for? Because here's what I've noticed in the lives of the people I most respect. Not historically, but right now, people I know. The ones who seem genuinely at peace aren't the ones with the best philosophy. They're the ones who found something worth giving themselves completely. And that thing, whatever it is for you, it's what turns self-matters from a personal project into something that actually leaves a mark. The Stoics gave you to the training ground, but you need a field to play on. There's a line from Chesterton that I keep coming back to. He was writing about Joan of Arc, trying to explain why she unsettled him so completely. This young peasant woman who somehow outpaced every intellectual and military figure of her time. And he wrote, "It was impossible that it should not occur to me that perhaps she, and the faith she professed, held some secret of unity and moral utility, a secret that has been lost." Again, a secret that has been lost. I think that's what a lot of men are circling around when they find Stoicism. They're sensing that something is missing, that the modern playbook, optimized, hustle, perform, doesn't actually hold up under real pressure. And the Stoics are better, but I don't think they're the end of the road. I think the men and women in the tradition I've been describing today found something the Stoics were pointing toward, but never quite reached. Not a better philosophy, a different kind of thing altogether. The question I want to leave you with is simple. You've learned how to master yourself. Now, what are you going to do with that?